The Michael Berry Show.
Well, we have just completed our every 2 years biennial legislative session of 150 days every 2 years. We're not a full-time state legislature. And you know what happened out of that. The governor has called special sessions to deal with several bills that will begin in about 3 weeks. One of the leaders in the House who shot to prominence pretty early is a lawyer by the name of Mitch who came to statewide fame as one of the lawyers defending Ken Paxton in the impeachment hearing, the impeachment case that was brought before the Senate. After that, he ran for state rep. He won against all odds. Very sharp guy, very sharp mind, obviously, and was welcomed by the grassroots in Austin as this is the kind of people we want to be attracting to the state legislature. So we're going to talk to him about what just happened. We're going to talk to him about whether this being the first day after the end of the finance filing date, when we're seeing candidates jumping into these races, with the Ken Paxton exit from the AG's race, whether he will be a candidate in that. And third, he is the lawyer, which is what he does in his day job, representing Kim Ogg in a case that has been brought against her, really, when you get down to it, by Rodney Ellis through Sean Tier, the district attorney, over the Jocelyn Nungarai case. But let's start with the state rep side of his life and the legislative session that just finished. Mitch, having been a freshman legislator, being considered by pretty much every group that measured who the stars of especially the newcomers, as being the star of this class, how was the legislative session different than you expected from the outside?
Well, good morning, Michael Berry. I know it probably hurts you to say all those nice things about me up front, but the legislation was the session was way more intense and chaotic than I had imagined it to be. You know, we're only deciding the future of things like THC in Texas, and I mean, it's happening in literally minutes. Very, very little debate. It flies through committee, and you're making decisions that are important for the state of Texas at 1, 2 in the morning. It's more chaotic, I think, than even it needs to be. That was surprising to me.
And why do you think that is? Do you think it's chaotic by design?
Absolutely, it's chaotic by design. I mean, when you move 4,000 bills through a legislature, it is literally impossible for human beings who are, going until 2 in the morning and then up again the next morning on committee at 8 a.m. to process all of that information. I mean, we have staff, but even they can't do it. So there are things that move through the process that really shouldn't. Things like Biden-esque loan forgiveness for mental health professionals in Texas, bills that come to the floor that are really Democrat-led initiatives that really shouldn't have been heard and shouldn't have been voted on. So it's almost like trying to find a needle in a stack of needles when you're processing information that quickly. And I don't think it's the best way to make decisions. What do you think?
Well, I tell you what I think happened, and I watched it more closely this session than usual, but I have watched it in the past. They take a lot of vacation at the beginning of the session and a lot of 3-day work weeks and long weekends, and the goal is to flood the zone at the end. Because if you're doing something that's not going to be popular with the base, because frankly Dustin Burrows is there by virtue of the Democrats lockstep and then a few Republicans, and then once they have their majority, then the other Republicans come aboard. But when you're doing things that are not popular back home, you have to rush those at the end. So you don't give them a full, fair hearing. In fact, that's what we're seeing going on in Washington, D.C. right now with the One Big Beautiful Bill. And so it looked to me, you tell me, like a lot of vacation on the front end. There was nothing being discussed, maybe a Beyonce bill ever so often, but Steve Toth was talking a lot about it. Brian Harrison was talking a lot about it. And I know you had to be frustrated by it. And then at the very end, you have this crush of bills that get pushed through and initiatives that people wanted that don't get passed, and it's, oh, we ran out of time, just send us back again.
There are absurd parallels between what goes on in Austin and what goes on in Washington. If you take what's going on with the quote-unquote big, beautiful bill, you've got the Senate parliamentarian who's killing the SAFE Act and basically gutting the NFA so that we can get short-barreled rifle, short-barreled shotgun suppressors without an NFA tax. And the parliamentary practice is more of a distraction than it probably needs to be. At the beginning of the legislative session, the first 60 days I was there, Michael, I was telling my wife, like, I do not belong here. This is ridiculous. Like, I'm not doing anything meaningful. And we're not having committee hearings. It wasn't until we started having committee hearings that I was like, oh, wait a second. I can use my tools to move the needle here. And the problem is it's so late that you end up stacking up good policy in certain bills that we need to get passed or not on the floor. So we have to come back July 21st to pass the things that really we should have passed the first time.
How much of the I don't belong here and how much of the it's a seniority game that takes forever has informed, and I don't know what the final decision is, I've heard flirtation with it, your desire to run for Attorney General?
Yeah, so what I'm trying to figure out is what's most compatible with my family life and my life at home. So obviously it would be a great honor to serve the state of Texas as its Attorney General. I think Texas is going to need a lawyer who's competent, who's experienced, who has practiced law meaningfully. I think we're woefully short on people in the race who have done that. And if you look back historically, before or when Ken Paxton was running, Ken Paxton's not a trial lawyer, and he was an excellent kind of guide of policy through the AG's office, helped us fight the Biden administration and all that. I think what we have coming here, Michael, is going to be trying to find out who the ideological leader of the party in Texas is. And because truly, from a grassroots standpoint, that has been Ken Paxton. And so if he goes off the Senate, it's going to be a lot harder for him to lead that ideologically going forward. And how do you embrace his aggressiveness in the Attorney General's office and still find someone who is really the lawyer you want to represent the state of Texas?
Well, I tell you what, I'll let you decide if you're going to make an announcement coming up. Mitch Little's our guest.
Michael Berry Show, Michael Berry.
Mitch Little represented Ken Paxton in the successful defense against impeachment. That impeachment was led by the John Cornyn supporters, the same folks who supported Nikki Haley and had an event for her in Texas against Trump last year in the primary. Never forget, it's the same folks. Read the list. Those people wanted to knock Paxton out, not from being Attorney General. They had no problem with him as Attorney General. They didn't want him to run against Cornyn because they were sitting on polls that we now all have access to that have Paxton beating Cornyn 60-40 and worse. Cornyn can't win this race. He knows that. So they're looking at recruiting another candidate. Well, in the meantime, Ken Paxton leaving the Attorney General's office occasions an opening. And there are 3 candidates who are announced for that. Aaron Reitz, who's with the Department of Justice now and previously worked for Paxton, I think he was a assistant U.S. attorney. Joan Huffman, who is a state senator, and Mays Middleton, who is a state senator. Mitch Little, will you be joining that race?
I'm not in that race yet. There's a lot to consider back home. I got a law firm. We got 100 people at our office to take care of. 60 of them lawyers. I'm sure they'd be upset about that. And I got 3 young kids too, 14, and 11, and they need their daddy. So if I decide to get in that race, all of those things will miraculously have been resolved.
How far do you live from Austin?
Good ways. It's going to take me probably 3.5 to 4 hours driving on a good day.
What is the community where you live?
I live in Louisville. I live in the southern part of Denton County.
But aren't you from Houston originally?
Yeah, I am, and I'm. You mentioned me representing Kim Ogg, and Michael. I know. I mean, a lot of your listeners are in Houston. You obviously live in Houston. You understand the hellscape that the left has created in Houston, and people who do not live there or are not from there don't fully grasp it. It's different from what's going on in Austin. It's different from what's going on in Dallas, and it's an ideological turnover of ordered society.
What did you just do? You just took my question and then you flipped it to what you wanted to talk about. What just happened, Mitch Little? What did you just do? What were you trying to get at? Are you wanting to talk about the Kim Ogg case? Because that's point number 3. We're on number 2 right now.
We can talk about whatever you want. This really bothers me. You were talking about the AG race, and it's interesting that 2 of the candidates are from the Houston area. What have those candidates? What have the Republicans representing Houston and all the billionaires that are flooding money into Republican politics? What have they done to stop the destruction of Houston from the inside out? It's very difficult for me to discern that, and I think that's something that
If that was the point you were trying to make,
ask.
You needed to make that point because I didn't get that from the first point. But now I see what you were saying. Well, let me handicap the race where I think it is today on July 1st, 2025 for a primary next spring. I see a very, very spirited race. You've got Aaron Reitz, who has, I think, is probably the most likely to get Trump's endorsement. I'm hearing he's going to get Paxton's endorsement. Those 2 would be very strong in that primary. Not necessarily enough to win, even in Texas, but that would go a long way. So that would be that. He's never been a candidate before. He's never run a campaign. But those 2 things behind him would make a big difference. Then you've got Joan Huffman. She's going to have TLR. They're going to pour a lot of money into this race, but we saw TLR support George P. Bush against Ken Paxton, and the money wasn't enough. Of course, whoever ran however much they paid for the ad to have George P. on the 4-wheeler out on the canyon, whoop, whoop, I'll be your attorney general, I'll be whoop, whoop on this 4-wheeler. That was dumb. The new Wrangler jeans.
They put
and
$8 million
boots.
behind Eva Guzman.
Yeah, they put money behind Eva. So they're not invincible. They do have deep pockets. I think they really don't understand the base. I really, really do. And I will tell you, I hate that we've lost them from the base because I think those guys, especially Dick Weekly, were a big part of turning Texas red in the 90s through tort reform. And somewhere along the way, they just decided they didn't want any part of the grassroots because our people don't drive nice enough. I don't know what happened. So you got Aaron Reitz. He's likely, although not certain, to have Paxton and Trump's endorsement. You've got Joan Huffman. She's going to have TLR's money and strategy, which is a mixed blessing in the state of Texas, but you'd probably rather have it than not. And then you got Mays Middleton, who I believe can probably self-fund. I don't know how big that family's fortune is, but I'm told it's big enough that he can fully fund a primary. I think that him supporting Louis Gohmert was to try to throw Paxton off is something he's going to pay for dearly. I think that was a massive mistake, and no amount of money can get you out of that if people know that. My question would be, I like you. I think you'd make a fantastic attorney general. I'd love for you to be the attorney general. And I think if you had the job, you'd be very good at it. The challenge is, and I had this same challenge running for mayor, everybody said you'd be a great mayor, but can you win? Because Bill White had all the money. So I guess that's what you have to, well, you said you've got to deal with whether you want to live in Austin. I think that's probably less of a challenge because your family would support you and it'd be a great experience, and you're a public servant and they get that. And it's a pay cut and all those things that go with that. I think the challenge is winning, and it's a big state that requires a lot of money. You got big media markets, you've got a vast span, and you've got some well-funded, tough candidates. There's no way around that. What did I miss?
Man, I just don't. I just don't worry about things like that, Michael. If the Lord tells me to go and run, I'll go and run.
didn't
That's what
either.
I did for my
didn't
current
either.
office. Yeah, and I was like, I was outfunded 2-1 and knocked out an incumbent. It's easy to see what God's plan was for my life now that I've, lived it for a couple of years. But if I feel like it's the right thing to do to run, I'm not going to worry about all those
Pray
things
over
either.
it, and I get it. I've been there. If a guy is not, if a public servant is not fearless, and he's calculating, this is my problem with Greg Abbott. I don't. That's not leadership. It has to be a righteous sense that this is the right thing to do, and God is directing me. And if I lose, there was a purpose in me losing, and that's how I've always felt. And when you get to that point, but let me ask you this: if you choose not to run, can you assure me that you will go back to the legislature because you are an important part of grassroots leadership?
I think
Hold
that's
tight.
a fair statement.
You can answer that
and
question. Hold tight right there. Mitch Little is our guest. He is currently a state representative. He was hailed by most as a star on the rise. He was honored by multiple folks for his contribution as an incoming freshman. Not your typical incoming freshman. He had been one of the lawyers, along with Dan Cogdell and Tony Busby, who represented Ken Paxton in the Senate impeachment hearing, and he's practiced law for some number of years. It was an upset for him to win the state rep seat in the first place. There is now an opening in the Attorney General's office, and he is considering a run for that. I thought he might announce it today. There are 3 strong candidates in that race: Aaron Wrights, Mays Middleton, and Joan Huffman, strong for different reasons: funding, experience, endorsements, and those sorts of things. But Mitch, I want to be very clear in saying I wasn't suggesting that you not run or trying to talk you out of it, because a lot of people did that with me and it pissed me off, and some of them I never forgave for it. And people who've never put themselves in the arena, as the old Teddy Roosevelt quote goes, don't understand. You don't always put your finger to the wind like Greg Abbott and see if you're going to be victorious. If you're called, you do it. So I want to make that clear. Let's talk about
thank you.
Let's talk about the case against Kim Ogg as brought by Rodney Ellis through Sean Tier. You are representing her. Can you first catch folks up on what they are alleging and then your defense?
Yeah, so there's for those of you who aren't staying up with the Jocelyn Nungaray case, there's a gag order that the court put in place September 11th of 2024, basically preventing the victims, their counsel, the DA's office from really speaking publicly in specifics other than generalities about the case. Kim is alleged to have been in contempt of that order by talking to the media about a few different things. It's apparently now pretty well known that the 2 men who are charged with the crime, one of them may or may not have sexually assaulted another woman in Costa Rica. And Ms. Ogg gave an interview online, or gave an interview about that. And Sean Tier's office is also complaining, and the defense counsel are also complaining, that it is now public knowledge that the 2 defendants are in the country illegally, and that there are details about Jocelyn's murder that are publicly known, like where she was found, the state in which she was found, the state of undress, etc. And everybody just seems to be missing the part where the President of the United States got up in front of 36 million people in the State of the Union and referred to the 2 defendants as, illegal alien monsters from Venezuela. I mean, this is now extremely publicly well known. So both the defense counsel and the district attorney's office are extremely worried that the general public is going to be somehow aware of the truth of the Jocelyn Nungaray case. And the question you should be asking is, why are they afraid of that?
Right. Why are they afraid of that? That's not the basis of a mistrial. That should have been entered into evidence during the course of the trial anyway, shouldn't it?
The point of this, in my view, the point of this is it is all part of the greater social reimagining of Harris County in Houston. And this crime is still extremely shocking. And you have generally an anti-death penalty party in control of politics in the city of Houston and the county of Harris. And I think that the overarching goal is to ensure that these are not death cases, that they're not tried as capital murder cases. And the more that the public knows about it, the more outraged the public is about what happened to this little girl, the more likely or the more pressure the district attorney's office is going to be under to make it to try it as a capital case. And they don't want to.
I think you also cannot underestimate that Rodney Ellis has a hatred of Kim Ogg for exposing the alleged crimes he has committed as district attorney after he supported her. The African Art Museum, the Elevate Strategies case with Lena Hidalgo, some other things that she exposed. You know, she convened a grand jury to hear his African Art Museum or his African Art case, and he has said some really he does not like to be challenged. He is boss hog of this community, and he wants nobody to stand in his way, and that's why he replaced her in that race, as you know.
I will shout it from the mountaintops. Houston is a fetid pool of corruption, and over the last 4 to 6 years, while statewide Republicans were shouting about the Biden administration and Joe Biden, they were ignoring what was going on right in front of their face in Houston. And it's not just the art deal. The universal basic income program that they've been pushing in Houston is not about giving poor people money. It is about turning out low propensity Democrat voters in Houston. It is a data play, because once they're in that system, they have the ability to target them and go after them to vote. It's about transforming the electorate in the county. It's not about giving poor people money.
I watched this happen in the first state where I had an affiliate in Oregon, where there was enough vote in Multnomah County, in Portland alone, to swing a statewide election. We've seen this in Louisiana, where you turn out the New Orleans vote. We've seen this in states where, in Detroit, where you get enough, Philadelphia, you get enough fraud, and you run up a big enough victory that you can afford to lose the rural counties across the state. The moment where statewide and national Republicans are going to start giving a damn is when they can't win the state of Texas, because you can't overcome the cheat in Houston. And that's going to be the moment that they're now all of a sudden going to wake up and say, maybe we have to go in there and do something about it, because they're abandoning the people of Houston, Harris County. And that's the great frustration. I wish you the best of luck in this case against Kim Ogg. I truly believe this is an axe that Rodney Ellis has to grind against Kim Ogg, and defeating her in the primary the way he did is not enough. He wants to finish her off, or if nothing else, cause her a lot of hassle. And since he controls the district attorney and he controls the courts, this was his last opportunity to try to stick it to her. I truly believe that's what's happened.
There are still good lawyers out there that will fight for truth and justice. And it has nothing to do with what party Kim Ogg is or isn't a part of. This has to do with standing up for what's right. And we all need to stop and think about the fact that there was a little girl at the center of this case. And there's been this tug of war, a political tug of war over her, over the crime that was committed against her. Democrats want to sweep it under the rug. We just can't let that happen, Michael. Not in an ordered society. We can't let that happen.
No, we cannot. Mitch Little, we look forward to hearing more from you. Thank you, sir.
The Michael Berry Show.